You ready?
Ready.
Hey, everybody, guess what? We are back. It's Megan and Bronwyn, and it's been a little hiatus, to say the least. With all that is going on in the cosmos and on this earth plane right now,
Yeah.
and for some time to come, we got back together again and said, we need to do this now more than ever. So we intend to do this throughout the upcoming year, starting with the big transit that just happened in November, and we'll be talking about that momentarily. And then coming to you each and every time there's one of these kind of big moments in time. And when they are arriving, we'll be sharing the astrological wisdom and practices that you can do to navigate these times, as well as connecting the dots to some yogic wisdom and, of course, yogic practices that will aid you as well. So, how are you excited, Bronwyn? I am.
I am really excited. It's great to be back. It doesn't even feel like that much time has gone by. I think it'll be easy to reconnect. And our focus for this season, if you will, is to really show up and be of service and to give you not only the big picture, here's what's happening in the world and in the cosmos, but to give you actions and practices that are going to help to ground you as we navigate what looks to be a pretty exciting and potentially tumultuous 12 months coming up.
Yeah.
So we want to be your companions through the changes ahead, to give you on the ground yogic practices to help you build resilience and astrological connection that's meaningful for your personal life, as well as being an insight into what's happening in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And we started it today, which is, we're recording on November 21st, I think.
Yeah, November 21st, the sun just went into Sagittarius, moved to Leo, so it's feeling a little bit more warm and festive than it has for a while.
Yeah. But the 19th was the date that we were focused on in terms of the one that made the most sense to begin this. So do you want to take it away, Bronwyn, and talk about November 19th, 2024, and what this means for all of us and individually?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure if those of you that follow some astrology online, you know the big news right now is Pluto moving into Aquarius. So Pluto is our slowest moving outer planet. So astrology is built around cycles, and we measure the small cycles and the big cycles. We see the moon moving through the whole zodiac every month and the sun every year, and we can really connect on a personal level with those movements and transits of what we call the personal planets. Now, there's another set of planets that are way out there in the outer reaches of the solar system. The outer planets are, for us as astrologers, the transpersonal planets. They take a really long time to go through their cycles. Pluto has been in Capricorn for 17 years. So when the outer planets or transpersonal planets change signs, that doesn't happen once a month or once a year or once every couple of years. It happens, it takes decades for that to happen. So when they shift, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for the collective, and it points out the places where you individually, it may be a big deal in your personal life or not. But what it highlights is where the arc of your personal life connects with that greater arc of history or the story of the human family. So these are generational planets. It's really different than treating it like a personal planet. So again, as we were looking ahead to 2025, we know that 4 of our outer planets are all changing signs. So it's going to be one of those significant years in the story of the human family, like 2008 was, like 2011 was, like 2020 was. We can think back to those dates and see, things happened in our own lives, but often they were connected to these bigger movements. So that's what we're looking at with Pluto. Pluto has made this change back and forth over the last couple of years. So this isn't brand new. This is the third time we've been sitting at 0 Aquarius with Pluto.
But now it stays for a while.
Now it's going to stay for 20 years. So this is really the official opening of a new 20-year cycle in our story as a human family, and in your story personally, where you connect with the big story. So what is that story? Well, Pluto is the Lord of Death. That sounds pretty scary. And honestly, parts of a Pluto transit can bring up our fears and can bring us face to face with powers that are bigger than us, things that we feel we can't control or that we truly can't control. The other side of Pluto is that he transforms us. And that's a word, I think Megan and I were joking about that, how much that word transformation gets bandied about, especially in our circles of astrology and yoga. But we all know that real transformation is an arduous and long process. Anybody that's done real self-work or seen themselves change over time in the course of a lifetime knows that transformation is sometimes really rewarding, but always really challenging. So think of Pluto as the guide to your personal and our collective underworld. He takes us down and then releases us again. So we go through these life, death, and rebirth cycles with him. So thank goodness he moves so slowly, right? Because we have time to learn what it is that needs to change and be reborn in our lives, collectively and personally, and learn how to work with it, experience our feelings, and show up for others. It doesn't happen all at once on November 19th, 2024. It's going to happen for 20 years. So this is just the doorway peeking open, and we get to see this big landscape that's ahead of us over the next 20 years. So there's no reason to be alarmed. Also, this isn't new energy. We've had tastes of it over the last couple of years. But nonetheless, it's big, it's potent, it's bringing change. And what can you do about that? What does it really mean? So what happens when the Lord of Death and Transformation moves into the sign of Aquarius? What is Aquarius? So Aquarius is an air sign. So we know this gives us some distance on things. It brings us into our rational minds. It gives us strategy, big perspective. All of the air signs do that. And we know that Aquarius is fixed. So we know we're in the realm of ideas, but we're kind of in the realm of fixed ideas. And we're in the realm of strategy, big picture, high up above, looking at the structures as they exist. We often hear about Aquarius as this kind of humanitarian. I think sometimes mistakenly we see Aquarius as this kind of warm and fuzzy sign where we all get together and there's beauty there. Now, Aquarius is a sign of groups, and so it can be that. It can be a shared idea that's really beautiful that we can all work towards together. But Aquarius is all groups and all fixed ideas. So I think all we need to do is look at the world around us right now and see that there's a lot of different ways for coming together around a fixed ideology can show up in our lives and in the world. So our job,
I was just thinking when you were talking about that, you could think of groups as being coming together, but that until there's one big group, having groups also implies division.
Exactly.
This group ends and this one begins, and that's what we're experiencing right now is this big boundary divide, apparently, between different groups, different ideologies, different practices. Yeah.
And that is the nature of Aquarius. And the sign that comes after Aquarius resolves those issues. So Pisces is that sign of unity and spiritual oneness and dissolving into one. That's the beauty of the zodiacal cycle. We get the antidote. When we're talking about Pluto, that's 20 years away. So there's a lot of work to do in the meantime to think, how can we come together in smaller groups? How can we build strategy and resilience and community as we are moving towards a more unified place? And not to glamorize that, because these cycles go around and around. We were here in the 1770s. We were here in the 1560s. These are revolutionary times. And again, that idea of revolution can be, yes, it's the revolution. But if we look at what that really means, it can be a difficult time to live through.
Yeah.
And there's revolutions driven by an ideology we believe in, and revolutions driven by ideologies we may object to. So all of those, none of this is happening tomorrow. It's not on your doorstep. This is slowly unfolding over 20 years. And this is too big for us as individuals to figure out, to deal with, to fix. So we are each given our own place within that. And that's what Pluto points to in your natal chart. How do I show up in service to the collective in an Aquarian way, with strategy, with clear-headedness, with the idea of service, but without too much emotion, which actually can be good. If we can look at how we can be of service to the group, if we can look at the whole group's needs, that's also very Aquarian. And the less our emotions are involved in that, actually sometimes the better, because we can make strategic decisions for the good of all without getting entangled in our own issues. So again, no one person is going to be doing this work.
Yeah.
We all have a small role to play.
As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about the Hindu cosmology that is also based on cyclical experience of time rather than linear. And in the yogic wisdom, it takes time and divides it into 4 parts, not 4 equal parts, but 4 parts that are called yugas. And we move through these cycles, or these 4 yugas, over the course of time. The first one being Satya Yuga, and Satya means truth. And it's said that this yuga lasts about 1.7 million years, give or take, probably 200,000 or something. But when we, the experience was being in Satya Yuga, you could say that the connection between us and the divine, or the mind of God, or truth with a capital T, or us being in our wholeness, was very, close together. And we were the possibility to come from right thought, right speech, right action, came fairly easily because we were so connected to our spiritual center. But then over the course of time, we moved into what would be called the silver, or, the next yuga. And that's said to have lasted about 1.7 million years. So less amount, 1.2. So it's less amount of time, but still, obviously, an extensive period of time. So hearkening back to what you were talking about, that these are pigs, long, slow sweeps or arcs through time and through transformation, But in similar also to what you were talking about is that as we move through these 4 yugas, there's dissolution, there's a decay, if you will, or a decline would be another word to use. And when we're in this second yuga, the silver one, we're a little bit less connected to our spiritual center. We're practicing less, and we're, there starts to be this need for something external to us, help guide our direction and provide moral authority over us. Okay. Then we move to the 3rd yuga, and it gets even shorter, 800,000 years. And this is a time when human behavior really starts to get complex, because we're probably functioning more out of our humanness and less out of our spiritual nature. And the idea of what is right and wrong, and how to navigate complex situations, it's less obvious. And so therefore, we get more lost, you could say, and just the whole nature of living together in groups gets more difficult. So now we have to go to even more reliance on external rules, systems, institutions, structures, and you can think of like now needing governments, institutions that instead of it just happening in a more organic nature, because we recognize our interdependence and collective, that our collective well-being and our individual well-being are tied together. We need that kind of legislated, if you will, from the outside. And the fourth yuga, which is called Kali Yuga, or the Iron Age, is the one that we're said to be in now. And this one is, the good news is it's shorter, it's 400,000 years, but it also is the cycle in time where we're closest to this kind of destructive dissolution stage. You could call it kind of end stage of this arc back towards wholeness and oneness and connection. But it is epitomized by the most strife and the most independent action without taking into consideration. It's kind of more of a me first kind of experience, and a sense of scarcity, a sense of lack, and therefore I need to adopt real protective behaviors, So you can just look around and see that that's how it is. And the good news, bad news of that is because we're in a cycle, also being the furthest away from Satya Yuga also means we're the closest to getting to it, I don't know that that's going to happen in my lifetime, but what I'm hearing you talk about is that this next 20 years is kind of like a pivot point. And that also shows up in the yugas, that as we get further away from true self, also the universe in a ultimately benevolent and loving manner kind of pushes the pedal a little bit harder, So I think that's what we're living through now. And I always have to remind myself, I chose to be alive now. That's both a privilege and a challenge.
Yeah.
So,
There's so many beautiful parallels there, I think, with the astrological cycle, even if we can't get them to match up exactly, just the way of thinking cyclically and viewing the journey of the human soul as something that goes through these periods of waxing and waning, releasing, declining, and growing again. We see that in every astrological cycle. And I found it really interesting that you used those words in reference to the Kali Yuga of decay, decline, degeneration. That's where Pluto puts the heavy foot on the pedal there. That's Pluto's job. I think we could say Pluto is like a cognate of Kali. It's the same archetype, just showing up in different ways. It's the necessary decay that makes way for new growth. And wherever Pluto is always somewhere. So where he lands in the chart shows what's up for regeneration, but it has to go through that decline and decay first. And we're not so good at that, especially in this culture. We're not so good at honoring that reality. The reality. I think there's other human cultures that do a better job of honoring that dark part of the cycle. And it takes a lot of courage to do that, because I've been having so many of the same thoughts that you just expressed about, well, here we are, and there is something in me that chose to show up in these interesting times. So therefore, there must be something in me, even if it's a small contribution, some way to show up in service.
Exactly. Yeah.
So If you're wondering about how to show up in service, one of the clues is looking at where Pluto is transiting in your natal chart. So your natal chart never changes, but the living sky goes on moving, and Pluto moves through a few signs in your chart in your lifetime.
Yeah.
And he's been hanging out in your Capricorn house for the last 17 years, saying, time to break down your financial structures, your living structures, your attachment to traditional ideas. That's been showing up somewhere in your life and chart. And now he's entering a new house saying, okay, we're going to renovate this room of the house. We're going to renovate it, knock it back to the studs, take it all apart so that we can rebuild something better. I just made a little workbook that you can download. There's a link underneath the video. You can do some journaling about this. But what I want to bring your attention to right now is, where are you going to show up in service? Where is the point where your story intersects with this bigger story that Pluto is bringing the human family into? You don't have to be familiar with your astrology chart or astrology at all. You just have to know what your rising sign is. So, for instance, Megan, you're a Virgo rising, correct?
Yes.
So you would look down and find Virgo ascendant. Now, this doesn't matter what sign you are. Like, I'm a Taurus. That's where my sun is, but my rising is Gemini. So you may not know what your rising is, but as I said, you can look it up. So this is not your sun sign. This is your rising sign. So for Megan, it's Virgo. And that means that Pluto is just coming out of her 5th house, where he's been renovating her relationships with her children. He's been renovating her relationship to pleasure and how she manages her creativity, and how she views the love affairs in her life and pleasure in general. Since 2008, does that track for you, Megan?
Yes.
Yeah. So for you, you can look at your rising sign, look at the number here, and then I've also, in case you don't know what the houses are all about, I've included this sheet where you can look that up. So for instance, if you are an Aquarius rising, the period that you're going into right now, he's going to be working on your identity. 20 years from now, you're going to have a completely different sense of self than you do sitting here today. It's not going to happen all at once, but this is the area of life that's going to be challenged to grow, and where you'll be doing that work of allowing things to decay and fall away and be in decline so that you can nurture those new little shoots that want to grow up in the compost. So you can download this, find your rising sign, find the house that Pluto is entering into. And I think it's also really useful to go back one house and see where he was before, because looking backwards always gives us a better perspective as we move forward. So you can see, what part of my life have I really been feeling that death and rebirth in, and what part of my life am I moving forward to renovate now? And the other piece of this is where, because it's Aquarius, this is where you're going to be showing up in service. So if you're feeling right now, like many of us are, like, this is really big, there's big changes going on, it's bigger than I am, and I want to help, but I have no idea what to do. This is a little bit of a clue. So for me, he's moving into my 9th house of wisdom, of higher learning, of your relationship to what's foreign. Astrology is in there as well. So that's telling me that I can show up in service by sharing my astrology. And Megan, for you, moving into the 6th house, correct?
Yes.
The 6th house of your daily work, how you already show up in service. So for you, it's really just showing up and doing more of what you already do, but in a way that really nurtures and nourishes your health and your daily routine. So you may find yourself restructuring your daily routine so you can get to the essence of your work in the world and really show up for people. And I think that probably resonates too for just where you are in your life path right now.
It does.
So for each of you, I encourage you just to look at this short 2-sentence definition of that house and think about, how in that area of my life can I make even a small impact that will be of service as we move into these times where we need to build resilience and be there for each other.
Thank you for sharing that. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's not like you'll only see Pluto's influence in the house that he's moving into in your chart. I mean, we'll all feel it in all areas of our life. It's just
That's
like
right.
extra emphasis in that particular part.
It's kind of where your personal life intersects with the bigger picture that we're all going to be seeing.
Okay.
We're all going to be seeing that Pluto and Aquarius energy. It's out there, it's in the world, it's happening. And then if
Yes.
thinking about how much does that affect my life? Where does my story intersect with the bigger story? So for instance, in 2008, the last time Pluto changed signs, went into Capricorn. We all know what happened in 2008, right? We had an economic crisis. For some people, that may not have impacted them personally. For others, it may have had a huge personal impact. And we can gauge that. And for some people, it had a really positive impact. New businesses were started. We're not, a huge impact doesn't mean negative. Just means there's a big story there. Good, bad, otherwise. So where your story intersects with the big story is defined by that house.
Yeah.
And looking at that in a clear-eyed way is going to help you to move forward. So I encourage everybody to do that too. Look back to 2008 and what chapter of your life have you been in since 2008? Because that chapter is ending now and you're beginning a new one. So for some of us, that might be like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Great. I'm so done with that. In fact, for most of us, it will feel that way because it's Pluto.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get to start a new chapter.
And what I'm hearing from you is, it's not all bad news, but there is definitely two things true, maybe at a heightened degree about what's coming, and that there's going to be intensity to the experiences that we're going to have, and that it's going to be even more unknown, that it feels like, like all the old kind of paradigms, rules, kind of business as usual is kind of degrading, falling away.
Yeah.
So in the interim, until we kind of get our, awareness of what the new way of being is, it's going to feel pretty intense and anxiety producing. And
I think it can, yeah.
Okay. One of the practices I think that yoga is, or any kind of somatic work is always beneficial for, is kind of counteracting this fight, flight, freeze state that we will go into in the unknown or in anxiety producing traumatic, possibly, situations. And I think no matter what, November 5th and the election results created fight, flight, freeze in everyone, regardless of, I think, what side you're on. And there's more of that to come, So this somatic work of getting into your body, mainly through breath work and through movement, but being out in nature, anything that grounds you into your physical body is going to be so important to do. Going forward, because it brings you back into the present moment where you can mark what is true for me right now, And then the other thing I think about is that as we continue to see all of our traditional institutions and social structures perhaps go away, or at the very least look very, very different than they have, that is going to, it will be helpful, let me put it that way, and maybe imperative that we turn towards ourselves and our own spiritual and moral authority. If you kind of go back to what I was talking about with Kali Yuga, where I said, as we move through each yuga, we start to rely more on these external sources that are supposed to keep us, let's call it, in line, keep us acting from a moral or a spiritual integrity. And as those are all kind of crumbling and finding some finding, because of their extreme, maybe religious ideology or practices, are really being difficult to adhere to anymore. And the good news in that is it's going to bring us back to this sense of, I have satya, I have a truth inside of me. And if I listen to that, instead of, resource or outsourcing that to even my family, or my social group, or my religion, or another group that I have derived my wisdom from, if we turn towards ourselves, we're not going to be steered wrong, because that voice, that knowledge, that knowing inside of us is based on truth with a capital T. So I, with all of this conversation today, I think we're both trying to acknowledge that, it's big what we're moving into, but it's also an incredible opportunity to make shifts in ways that might not have happened if we had had a more tender outcome to the election, for example, in the United States. Maybe it would have been easier to go back to business as usual. But in so many ways, business as usual was failing us individually and collectively. And, we were seeing big divides between people who were benefiting from the systems that were in place and others who were suffering tremendously underneath them. So. And then just the other thing I wanted to emphasize today was this whole need and really almost mandate, you should feel it as, is to be in community with one another, which is, doesn't have to be in any sort of, think broadly, I think about that. It can be, find a community that you play pickleball with, which is something I've been really enjoying lately, or a community like that's more spiritually oriented, like I think Perennial is and what it offers, but whatever community you show up in, be more radical in your willingness to show up authentically, And I think that will move the needle, move us forward collectively more possibly than anything, because we've all been kind of trying to fit ourselves into systems and structures and ways of being that are denying our full expression. And that is not going to move us forward in the way that authenticity can. So what do you think?
I think that that is so beautifully said. And I think that that is the place where we can reach that true Aquarian ideal of a humanitarian community. And I think that we will all need to show up and do the work, what it truly is to be in community, honoring the diversity that can exist in community and building connection where we can. And I keep coming back to this idea of simple service. And I think that goes so well with what you said about showing up authentically, that our story won't necessarily connect with the big story in a grand way, but it's even more important to show up, as you said, in authenticity and with small, regular acts of service to rediscover what community really is, how we really can be the support for each other. Because I think the reality is we're going to need more on the ground support. We're going to need the resilience and the openness to diversity to be able to show up as allies, as real allies, not just social media allies. Speaking especially as a white woman in a colonized place, I know that I have a lot of personal work to do to be able to show up in that way. And that's where the individuality and authenticity piece comes in, because we're all going to have that, we're a different facet, a different place in the circle with different work. but that commitment to community, it's part of the reason you and I are doing this. I think we
Yes.
both feel so strongly that that's where it is. That's where we can feel like we're making a difference and tangibly on the ground make a difference in ways that we can't even picture right now because we don't know exactly what's going to be happening in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, who is like the symbol of God, or higher wisdom, talks to Arjuna, which is all of us, about the different ways to do our yoga. And basically, it's our different ways of showing up in life. And one of those ways is as a karma yogi. And a karma yogi is a person who follows the path of selfless service. And there's so it's going to be crucial that we find our way into areas in our lives that we can do that. And it can be as formal as finding a civic group, that resonates for us. It's something we feel vital about, whether it's connected to climate change or what's going on with immigration, and the list is pretty endless right now. And others of us, and I think this kind of fits with me, is this whole idea of being resistance and kind of being the disruptor, and in a nonviolent way, but the disruptor and the one who, the worst thing we can do is start to fall asleep and to start to go into our protective shell and isolate from one another and start to pretend that if I take care of myself and guard myself from anything happen to me, that it's possible to move through what's coming. I don't think that that's possible in the era that we're moving into.
No.
It's going to become, this is the best part of the age of Aquarius, if you will. So, yeah.
I think in our next show, we're going to deal directly with that idea of that feeling of wanting to go into your shell and just protect yourself and those closest to you, and the ways that that can serve us and the ways that it's going to hinder us. With the next big transit that we speak about, we'll be able to build some tools and open up some ideas about working directly with that impulse in ourselves and others. So I think that that's great that you brought that up at the end, because that is some really important self-work that we all have in front of us. And we have an astrological transit that's going to help us by bringing our attention to that part of ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Bronwyn, you're right. It feels like we just did one of these yesterday, and my heart feels lighter, and my outlook about it's not likely to be easy, but it's profound, and times that we're living in, and I'm just so grateful for our opportunity to connect in this way and share these ancient wisdoms that come through astrology and yoga, because they're so relevant in so many ways. So yeah.
Thank you for making this space, Megan. I think this is important work for us. This is a place where we can connect and do our service. And I'm excited about what's next and really grateful. And I feel lighter in my heart too, just to have had this conversation. So whatever good may have come from this, I want to just dedicate to the well-being of anyone who's listening and reverberating on beyond that, and hoping this is of some small help to you as you navigate these challenging moments in our world.
Yeah. And for those of you who joined us today, we're so grateful to have you in this space, whether it's a return for you or you're a new listener. And I think we'll see you again in January. Is this when the next transit happens? Or
there's actually something we could talk about in December if you have space for that. So December or January, look for the next episode, and we'll come back and talk about the Mars retrograde.
Yeah, great. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.